All right, well, the countdown is 18 days till Christmas as we are recording here. Digging Deeper audience, so glad to see you guys again. I have here just a wonderful crew with me, and we're excited. We are talking about John 4. If you were with us last week, we had some amazing worship leaders with us, and I'd mentioned we are going to take a couple passages that we've taught over the past few weekends, and we're going to discuss it here. But before we get there, I want to introduce you three. You're probably familiar with them at this point, but I'm going to ask you the question. What is your favorite Christmas tradition with your family? We're going to go ladies first. Far right, Tawny.
Oh, we have so many traditions. We usually take a week or two off and stay in our pajamas as much as possible and watch lots of movies and sleep in and make big breakfasts all as a family. And it's just really relaxing and delightful. And we look forward to it all year.
I do the same thing, but I don't take work off. I actually just show up in my pajamas, watch movies. It works out well. Awesome. All right, Natalie, favorite Christmas tradition with your family?
Well, so as of lately, the last few years, we've done Secret Santa, which has been really fun, especially our family is growing. And so, it's really fun. There's this website where they send you who your person is, and you can upload an Amazon list of what you want. And so you're not like trying to sneakily have someone ask someone. And, so kind of excited. I kind of think one of my parents has me just with like little sly things I've noticed.
Double spaces.
Yes. I know
that's what older people do, double spaces.
Yeah, the way they ask. Also on the website, you can ask questions to the person. Like, what did you mean by you wanted... I don't know. It's just kind of funny. So
that actually might be a huge resource. What is that website? Because some people might like...
Is it drawnames.com? Yeah.
Elfster's another one. That has been huge for families. If you are tired of spending like several $100s for your family, Secret Santa, pick one person, go big. A lot of fun.
Yeah.
All right. So real quick, before we get to you... Who's the person in your family you hope draws your name? Do you have one, like a person that has just been really good at giving gifts?
Oh, Tyler's a good gift giver.
Okay.
I think it's,
Hey, good job.
Pretty good.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Yeah. Okay, Tyler, to you.
Man, both of you guys sound like awesome traditions that I love, like eating and Secret Santa. So, I just like the change of pace.
Slows down a little bit?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Awesome.
Hopefully slows down a little bit.
That's a good point. Yeah. Yeah. Super cool. All right. Well, a lot to get to. So, listeners, we are going to look at the whole, I believe it's the first 42 verses of John 4, the woman at the well, as well as that dialogue with him and his disciples when the Samaritan woman, as Tyler aptly named Sam in your message, is heading into town. Last week, we did take a little bit of time and talk about one aspect, but this time we're talking about the whole thing. So quick context. Tyler, I want to start with you. Samaritans, Jews, do not like each other. I think we covered this in a lot of our teachings of the weekend, but give us a quick why.
Okay. Stop me if I'm going too long. So after King Solomon, the country splits up, civil war, but unlike our country, never reunites. And so there's that tension there, and it just continues to build. The country Assyria takes over the north. They take it over and then settle it with all sorts of foreigners. And the foreigners and the Jews living there marry each other and have kids. Wouldn't necessarily be a huge problem, but they adopt the gods. Like right now, we marry into someone's family. Back then, you'd marry into someone's family gods, and they adopt. So pretty much the Samaritans had, they were, half Jewish, half Gentile. So there's kind of some ethnic hostility. There's religious hostility because they're no longer being loyal to the God of Israel. And then it just continues to escalate. There's this story of, so the high priest John Hyrcanus comes to the Samaritans' temple and just destroys it, just with an army. So that's not cool. And the Samaritans sneak into the temple with a bunch of dead bodies, totally desecrate it. So there's these kinds of stories where it's like they are really tit for tat, really trying to. So it wouldn't even be safe sometimes to travel in between because you would get rocks thrown at you.
Okay. And I think one way I read Jews viewed Samaritans as like half-breeds or whatever, and it made me... I almost shared this at Rogue River, like the idea of Harry Potter and how they felt about people that were born from like humans or whatever. their
The
angst,
Muggles.
the Muggles, yeah, angst towards like Hermione and stuff, but didn't know where the congregation was at with Harry Potter. So
Yeah.
I feel like it might
Next,
be safer
digging
here.
deeper, it could be, is Harry Potter okay?
So we're gonna go to Tawny. You'd mentioned that sometimes they didn't find it safe, maybe even to go through Samaria. Tawny, real quick, I want you to provide context. Verse 4, it mentions Jesus had to go to Samaria. Unpack that a little bit for us.
Well, actually, when we went through it as a church this time was the first time I even really paid attention to that. But it was so exciting, actually, because like you explained in Rogue River, there were 3 different routes that they could have taken. And obviously, Jesus had 3 choices, but he had to go through there. So I just pictured, well, it made me think about the verse, and I should have looked it up, but I didn't think. Anyway, of how the Lord's eyes roam to and fro over the earth, looking for somebody whose heart is turned towards him. Just picturing the Samaritan woman, like, kind of being lonely and doing her chores and just pondering the Messiah and pondering the ways of God and thinking about worship. And, you know, God couldn't ignore her heart for him, so he had to go there. And I just thought that was really sweet.
Awesome. No, I appreciate that. All right, Nat, to you. So I kind of, what is the significance of the well, or even this full story in the full biblical narrative?
Yeah, well, I just was doing some research as I was reading up on this passage, and there are a few different examples in the Bible of men and women meeting at a well, and it's shocking because, we see Isaac and Rebecca. Their love story starts at a well, and then we see Jacob and Rachel. Their love story also starts at a well, and then Moses and Zipporah in the beginning of Exodus. And it's interesting because this theme has the same elements of it. You know, a man and a woman meet at a well, and then a man asks the woman for water, and, you know, she complies, and then she goes back to her hometown, and then with good news, and then they go get married. And that almost to a T happens with all 3 of those stories. And it's fascinating because people who knew the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, would have been shocked when then Jesus shows up at a well of water and asks a woman for a drink, because this woman wasn't like Zipporah or Rachel or Rebecca. Like, she wasn't a virgin. She was blemished. She was not desirable like those 3 ladies. She had not a good past and a lot of junk in her life, you know, and but then Jesus does all the same things. He asks her for water. He engages in a lengthy conversation. She goes home, brings good news, comes back. And it just kind of is so neat just how, I think that would have shocked people who knew the patterns in the Hebrew Bible, seeing Jesus do that in John 4. And so I just think that's kind of neat. You know, he offers union to her, and just as those other 3 men did that to women. So.
No, very cool.
It's interesting, on top of the like John 2 story, turning water into wine at a wedding, and then John 4 is like has wedding elements and themes that are being traced through. I imagine like Jewish people reading the Gospel of John for the first time going like, what's happening here? What's going on? You know, because it's like a similar theme, but it's also, there's a difference too. That they obviously don't get married, but it's like the bigger marriage of Jesus and his church. And so that's a really cool feature. I don't know if any of our teachings really your teaching dove into that a little bit.
More towards the end, yeah.
It was cool.
Yeah. Well, I can see people being like, oh, no, Jesus, this is not who you want to, you know, it's just, he turns things upside down, right? That's the whole gospel. So anyways, kind of neat.
Well, another thing, the way that humans tend to long for romantic love to satisfy their souls, and it doesn't tend to work. You know, Jesus can give us that real satisfaction, that living water that we're all looking for in all these other places too.
Yeah.
That, Tim, is what you call a segue.
Yeah, no, that's perfect.
Wow.
No, that was great stuff. I love that. That is exactly why I asked you 3 to be on this podcast. So yeah, let's dive right into, and it's cool. 3 of the 4 of us did teach on this, but if you know anything about River Valley, you know that all of our messages went through Tawny as well. So your guys' favorite thing that you pulled from this passage. I am going to challenge you and say only pick one, because there's just I mean, even as you started us off, Nat, there's so many.
Well, I would say also in light of the whole Bible, I do think that it was, and my dad and I, when we talked about this a little bit, but just this idea of Shechem and a lot of brokenness that had happened in that city back in Genesis and also in Judges and a few other books. But I think the story of Dinah, was tragic. What happened to her, Jacob's daughter getting raped in Genesis 34 in the city of Shechem. And I almost feel like John 4, we encounter a new Dinah, which is kind of interesting. But there's a part so in Dinah's story, like, we don't really read Jacob being distressed about what happens to his daughter. Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't, but we just see Dinah's brothers being angry about what happened. And there's nothing in the passage after that tragic thing happens to Dinah. There's nothing in Genesis 34 where it says that Jacob was grieved or was weeping or sackcloth and ashes or anything. What we do see him say is he's upset with his sons for killing the man who murdered or who did that to her and for genocide. He says, "Oh, you've made things really inconvenient for me." Right. And so we don't see him that bothered about what happens. Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. But then here we are in John 4, and it's like a new Dinah in front of Jesus, and he's redeeming her. He's giving her the listening ear and the attention that Jacob never did. And that Jacob never gave his daughter. And there's a moment in the passage where she says, "Are you greater than Jacob?" And it's like, yeah, Jesus is greater than Jacob. And so it's just fascinating, just how Jesus, I think, kind of brought resolution to that story for all the Dinahs out there. All of us are broken and have hard things happen to us. And it's sad because we never hear about Dinah after that story. I think she's mentioned later in a genealogy. So we never hear if she ever got attention or listened to. But Jesus listens to the woman in John 4 in the same region. And I just think it's like a full circle for her. So yes, Jesus is greater than Jacob, So anyways, I just found that very fascinating, that story. So
that's good. And kind of on that, I love, and I think The Chosen did a really good job at demonstrating this, but I don't think we could ever fully understand. But the restoration that was happening in that woman's heart as she's talking to Jesus, because I think we've been in ministry where we just love those moments where we can tell that we have talked to somebody who is feeling heard or feeling loved for the first time, or someone who's had a bad past with a church and they've just said, "I've never felt safe in a church until now," or just something like that. And to see it at this length, this woman who probably feels worthless, feels like she doesn't even love herself, and to get all of that redeemed and restored in this conversation, to see that just come out in her heart is just so powerful. And like I said, like Chosen did a great job, but I would have loved to just been able to experience that, like be a fly on that well or whatever. That's probably my favorite part. And like you said, Jesus is breaking all the red flags to do this. No. She's a lowly woman. Don't waste your time on her. She's a woman. She's a Samaritan. Like 3 or 4 things. You're sinless. She's a sinner. Don't waste your time. He's like, I literally don't want to be anywhere else. Just showing his heart so masterfully. But so that was my favorite thing. Tani?
Well, I'm glad you limited us because there's so many things about the story I love so much. But I know for me personally, there was a time when every time I opened my Bible, even when I was trying not to, it would fall open to this story. And this was a long time ago, but I'm like, Lord, what are you trying to show me? And the part, I love that he trusted her with the, worshiping him in spirit and in truth part, because that's such a rich theological, amazing concept. And just thinking about what that means for us, and that, up until this point, the Jews had all these rules, like tons and tons and tons of them. But a time was coming, and it is now here, where we can be filled with his spirit, and the spirit will teach us truth. But we have to be filled with the spirit, and we have to care about truth, and we have to seek truth. And that will enable us to really worship God. And that was just so meaningful to me, to just realize that we need both of those things, and we shouldn't try to have one without the other, because it won't really work. So that's what has been the most impactful for me from this passage in my life.
Awesome. Swinging it to you, Tyler. Favorite thing?
I like when the lady leaves, and that sounds weird. She runs back into town, and the disciples roll up, and they're like, hey, Jesus, you need to eat something, which is kind of funny. It's like, oh, maybe his blood sugar's a little low.
Right.
He's acting a little weird, talking to Samaritan women, like, Jesus, eat something. And he's like, I have food that you know nothing about. My food is to do God's will and finish his work. And I don't know. We've probably all been there when we're like serving the Lord and we're operating in our giftings and everything's working and clicking. And it's just like the most satisfying. You might like totally have forgotten to eat all day. You're like, I'm filled up in another way. So yeah, that's the thing that stood out to me.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
That's cool.
It's really neat.
Yeah. No, I feel for the disciples. Like they were in town getting food, and so they're like, "Food's on the brain," but then just Jesus is on a completely other level.
Yeah, it's like they missed it all. It was lunchtime for them.
Yeah, they're just coming back. Yeah, they're getting ready to sit down at the well, and Jesus is like, "We're ready to move."
Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, sticking in the culinary world, Tyler, I'm going to keep this on you.
Culinary.
Yeah, a big word of the day. It means to colon. No, I got nothing. Sorry.
Okay.
And that's what we call a bad segue. So, verse 10, Jesus offers this living water. So, yeah, Tyler, a few things I want you to answer for us, and obviously, ladies chiming in. I'm going to throw them all three at you. Take them as you want. What does it mean to have living water? And then if you can, let's try and dissect what it would have been like for the lady to try and unpack this brand new concept. Very one-dimensional, okay, I understand what water does. Him offer this brand new spiritual second level. And then what does that mean for us today here on earth? So putting all that out there for you.
Yeah, so the phrase living water can be taken a couple different ways. One, it could just mean flowing water, like a creek or like the spring that feeds the well that they're sitting at. So it would just mean like flowing water, moving water. And that's what she thinks he means. Right. Like, oh yeah, show me where the source of this thing is. So yeah, she misunderstands him, as often happens in John's gospel. Jesus and someone will have this misunderstanding. What does Jesus mean by it? Well, he's kind of referring back to the prophets who use this idea of living water in a really powerful way. So there's like Jeremiah who says in Jeremiah 2:13, my people have committed a double evil. They have abandoned me, the fountain of living water, and dug cisterns for themselves, cracked cisterns that cannot hold water. So Jeremiah is using that image of the cistern, which is like this cement hole in the ground that collects water, and if it gets cracked, the water would drain out. And what does a hole in the ground turn into in the ancient world? Dumpster, trash, sewage. There's even this story where Jeremiah gets thrown in one of these things, and it says he sinks into the mud. Pretty gross. And someone rescues him and pulls him out. So that's this image of a cracked cistern, and God's telling his people, like, hey, you've rejected me, you've rejected the source of life, and so you're withering, you're dying without me. Then you get these cool images in the prophets and the Psalms of like the tree planted by streams of water that bears fruit. You get that in Jeremiah. There's this vision in Ezekiel 47 where this river is flowing out of the temple, and everything it touches, it restores and heals, including the Dead Sea, which is dead if you didn't know. It's very salty, like way more salty than the ocean because there's no outlet. But this water touches it, and in Ezekiel's vision, the sea, there's now fish that can be in it. And so the prophets envision living water as like a time of God's healing and restoration and renewal of the people. In the same way where like it's amazing what water can do. Like say you have a patch of grass that's not growing and you just put a little sprinkler on it, and all of a sudden in a day or two it's super green. Or your garden, you don't water it or whatever. Like it's just a profound, water does amazing things. And so I think that's what Jesus is getting at, is like, hey, I'm offering you new life, restoration, renewal, healing, cleansing, in the way that water works. It's actually a pretty simple idea, but yeah, she wasn't ready for it. And she wouldn't have read the prophets. She would have only read the first 5 books of the Bible, so she wouldn't have had this background necessarily, because Samaritans didn't read the prophets.
Right.
When I love about the living water, just that it's never ending. Like you're overflowing with this living water that to me, it's just kind of a picture of abundance and just eternal life and cleansing, just holiness. It just has it's just delicious.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it like meets us in real time, in our lives today. Like it satisfies our thirst, like on a Monday morning, as in like, living for God. And Tawny and I talk about this a lot, like living for God in his kingdom today is exciting. Like there's a sense of we're living an eternal life today. So, getting to live out our spiritual gifts, getting to participate in God's kingdom, getting to have communion with God, that's sustaining for me today, not just like heaven later, but today I get to be nourished. And so, and I liked the Ezekiel prophecy because there's also not just the Dead Sea, but the dry bones in the valley that the water touches and brings to life. And that was like a picture of what Jesus was going to come and do. Even this theme of water all throughout Scripture, I read somewhere that water is mentioned over 700 times in the Bible, and we see like it's I think on the second page of Genesis, it's the stream that God brings up from the earth that actually starts to cultivate growth and the garden and greenery and shrubs. And so water from the beginning, it's growth, and it's the water that is mixed with dirt that makes clay, that makes Adam. And so it's like water brought life from day one, and so it's just exciting, that theme of water throughout Scripture,
And then later in John chapter 7, Jesus says, the one who believes in me, as Scripture said, will have streams of living water flow from their belly. And then he says, he said this about the Spirit. So there's a specific tie between living water and the Holy Spirit, which is cool to think about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I love, that idea of living water, running water, flowing water versus like stagnant water.
Yes.
You talk about a comparison, an immediate comparison. You do feel refreshed. You're walking along a river or something, and it just, you see life with it. But then you are by a stagnant pond, and you see death, and you like it smells like death. Like it's just as terrible. And so I've always used that comparison in my life. Just even feeling convicted sometimes, like, what are you more demonstrating in your actions right now? Like, are you demonstrating the living water that flows through you, or are you acting all stagnant? Because there's not even one good thing about a stagnant pond. Like, if I had a goldfish I was trying to kill, I put it in the stagnant pond. That is it. So that's always been just a fascinating comparison, I think, for me. So there goes my pen. All right, well, so I want to send this question to the couch. You two ladies, not just the couch. So, yeah, this is just a great example of Jesus's heart, in my opinion, very powerful towards women. He has this life-changing for a whole community, this interaction with women. So many things are happening with this woman. So, Nat, I want to send this question to you. What do you think of this passage from your perspective? What does this say about Jesus's view on women? And actually, I want you to run with that. Yeah, what do you think about that? And maybe how it compares to his culture in the day and ours today here as well.
Yeah, well, we obviously all know that women were, just seen as so, just viewed so lowly in that culture, seen as possessions, seen as things. They didn't have legal rights. They couldn't testify in court. And even in Greek and Roman culture, it was just even worse. It's just sad. So Jesus just breaking through that barrier is just, he's such a champion for women. I think I personally, just as I studied this passage, just found myself falling just deeper in love with Jesus just through this interaction. It's just, I don't know, it's powerful. I think going off of what Tawny said earlier, Jesus entrusted, I think, just some deep theological truths to women, and some women got to preach those as well, which I found fascinating. Women were the ones who spoke on the resurrection, and this woman in this passage is like the first missionary in the Gospels in church history. And then, he reveals his Messiah, role to her, which is beautiful. The first person who gets to hear that. And so I'm also just encouraged that Jesus made women, disciples in his ministry. We read about Mary Magdalene that I think it's in Luke 3, or wait, I wrote it down. I want to make sure I get this right. Oh, Luke 8. We learn that, Mary, Joanna, and Susanna are disciples supporting the ministry financially, which is neat. We see Mary learning at the feet of Jesus in Luke 10, and then Tabitha later in the book of Acts. And I think it was important for Jesus' 12 disciples to see how Jesus treated women also. And I think that helped them in their ministry in the book of Acts do life with women as well. Just a countercultural thing for them probably. And so yeah, I there's so much I could say on this. So maybe
say
another
as much as you want.
Yeah, but yeah, I just he just really championed women. We never see him ever disgracing women or discriminating against women. We never, see him stereotyping or belittling or disapproving of women. I just think it's a beautiful, beautiful way that he, liberates women in the Gospels. And it kind of, makes me fall in love with him over and over again. So I don't know if you have any thoughts, Tawny.
Well, I had somebody tell me one time that if Jesus was here, in person, in the flesh on earth today, he doesn't think that he would be alone in a room with me because I'm a woman and he has to worry about appearances. And I found that extremely offensive. So I love that Jesus sent his disciples away to go get lunch while he met with this woman alone so he could talk to her in that, deep kind of way. So I just love that relationally, God does not withhold himself from women in any kind of way. He engaged with the women fully. He didn't hold himself back out of fear of what they would think or what other people would think. He gave himself to women in the same way he gave himself to men, just loving them and reaching out to them and offering himself to them in whatever way, they needed at that time. So that's my favorite part about it.
Love that.
Anything, Tyler?
Well, I just really like the image of Mary studying at Jesus's feet. I don't think that one's Mary Magdalene. I forget which Mary that one is.
It's Lazarus' sister.
Lazarus' sister. And she's just studying at his feet. And that was like things disciples did. And most teachers wouldn't have women disciples. Mm-hmm. Now we know Jesus' 12 were men. And, we could talk about why. But in terms of the larger group of disciples, he brought women up to be a part of that process. And his church is made up of men and women. And so he was modeling that. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, totally. So I think, there's so many barriers I think we see Jesus knock down, but it's pretty clear that this story, even in modern day, I think we have built these constructs towards women and maybe even a superiority of men over women, whatever. But I think that this story clearly echoes what you just said, that Jesus sees men and women both as valuable pieces in his kingdom. And day in and day out here at River Valley, women and men alongside each other are kicking butt. So so kind of a question I want to send to you guys, and Tawny, maybe ask you to lead the charge on this one. So I think in our minds, we can recognize when we are about to approach a social barrier. I'm about to do something that's going to be a little controversial, ... whatever it may be. There could be tons of things. We see Jesus knock down 3 barriers in the story. Again, the Samaritan, the woman, she's a prostitute. Do you think it was difficult for him to...
Oh, sorry.
What?
We're not sure she's a prostitute, but...
Oh, I'm sorry.
How dare you label her? I'm just kidding.
I'm sorry, not a prostitute.
she might have been.
Yeah, she might have.
maybe.
Yeah, sorry. I just got so used to, as I was studying it, saying that she might have been. I just went with it.
You should have seen Natalie's face.
We don't know. Who knows what she was.
Right, but to emphasize maybe her provocative lifestyle.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
So sorry, we derailed you.
Let me collect my... Boom. So do you think that Jesus even gave it a second thought, or do you just think that... was it hard for him to knock down social barriers when he was sharing the gospel, or do you think it was just so in his nature to just be relational to people that he didn't even give it a second thought?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind for me is where it says that, man judges by appearance, but God looks at the heart. So I think Jesus had an ability to look past all of the superficial things in people's lives and in their appearance and in their situations and see their hearts. And that's what he cared about the most. And honestly, I think, well, maybe I shouldn't say that. I think there's a possibility that he actually might have enjoyed shocking people a little bit because he did it so often and he was not careful or blatant or, he didn't cushion it a lot of the time. I think he came to show us what God really meant by a lot of the things that were in the law. And Tyler and I talked about this a little bit before. Like, sometimes we misunderstand God's commandments, and then it seems like God's not following his own rules.
Yeah.
But Jesus was showing us what God had in mind all along. So I personally don't think it was hard for him at all because he had no fear of man. He was only living to obey his Father and to do his Father's work in this world. So I don't think it was difficult for him to do that. Okay. But what do you guys think?
I would just say his concerns were there was times when he didn't want his ministry to be too proclaimed yet. It seemed like, or not. I don't like the word proclaimed. It seemed like he was careful to not start a bunch of rumors about things as far as his time had not yet come, or he was careful in some ways.
That was more controlling the mob, though.
Yeah.
Wasn't it?
Well, I think that there was a little bit of he was
Timeline.
he was
working on a
careful
divine
in some,
timeline for sure.
This is an unpopular opinion, but I would say my view, not necessarily anyone else's views, but my view of why he didn't have women in the 12 was I think he didn't want to start too many of. I think it would have been so countercultural that too many rumors would have started and it would have kind of thrown off things unnecessarily. But that's my opinion. It might be unpopular among people I'm around, but
real quick, is there any resource or something that has helped you develop that thought, or
more so just that I think that him having 12 disciples who they spent a lot of time together. They would sleep in the same area together. They were out day and night together. I just think having women a part of that 12 would have just been blown up.
It would have been too much for her.
I think, but I need to look more into that for sure.
No, that's a fascinating thought.
And some of this is how you view the role of women in ministry, and that's discussions that we've had a lot as a church, and Christians have had for hundreds, thousands of years. So that will shape the way you ask that question: why did Jesus not have a female in the 12? But yeah, it's an interesting conversation for sure.
Okay.
What was your original question, though? I think I went a little on a tangent.
No, I mean,
was it hard for Jesus to have this conversation?
And tangents are great. That's what I love. But to go off of that, so was it hard for Jesus to knock down these barriers? Tani's answer, no. Second question to either Tani or you guys, what do you think, just very realistically or logistically, makes it hard for us in today's world? Because we're very aware of those barriers. Kind of seems like Jesus just went through them because his mind was so centered on the gospel. But what do you think? What are things in life that make it hard for us, where it doesn't appear that it was hard for Jesus? Now, granted, he's Jesus and we're not.
I do wonder, to almost rewind back to the question Tani answered. Yes, Jesus was God, but he grew in wisdom and stature. And I just wonder, how his parents treated people. I wonder how Joseph and Mary treated people. How did they treat foreigners and Samaritans? Did he learn things from his parents in interacting with women and others? So I always wonder about that a part of his training was, yes, with his human parents, but also his heavenly Father. And he's constantly crossing those barriers, hanging out with sinners and tax collectors. And but for us, I think I'm always afraid of controversy, I don't want to make church people upset, if I
reputation.
Yeah. Reputation or, what will people think or whatever. I don't know.
All right. So you probably boil it, kind of your answer down to just the opinions of others.
I think that's definitely a big one. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Ladies on the couch, do you guys have?
Well, I think for me, why do we have those barriers to start with? Like, if a lot of times we have these barriers because of what we've been taught or different ideas or whatever. And so for me, the confusion is that a correct barrier or not? And so as long as I'm like trying to figure out if this is a correct barrier, I hesitate. But once I know that that's a barrier that man has set up, it's not a barrier from God, then I'm able to go through. So it's just maybe good teaching and strong convictions that are from God and not worrying about what people think about it. Because a lot of it is just we get stuck in some things that aren't even important, but they've always been that way, so we just think they're right. And so it's relearning, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, there's a lot of fear in that too. I think we get scared of people that are different than us. You know, we fear of the other, fear of the stranger, fear of the people on, you know, Fox News, CNN, whatever. We just get scared of people we don't understand. You know, so then scared of what others will think when we're with those people we don't understand.
Totally.
You know.
Yeah, and I also think there's like another element of the fear of like, you know, God wants us to be with these people. So what happens if I start doing that? Like almost wading into water deeper than you're comfortable with. Like, oh, what if God asked me to do this and I do it and it's actually happening as he says? Like, this is scary. I can't control it. I don't know what's going to happen next. I think there is kind of a fear, but it's a little bit of a thrill, I think, in us sometimes where it's like, wow, when we go to where God calls us, it can be scary. It can be dangerous. It can be different. And it's just so unknown and we have no control. But I think once we're able to grasp that, I think we're able to move deeper into that. But yeah, all right. So okay, I kind of have a half-baked thought in my head. So I'm going to toss it out there. You guys can shoot it down if you want. So I was kind of thinking of another follow-up question, kind of the idea of asking you guys to compare and contrast the opposition that Jesus faced versus the opposition that we face as far as spreading the gospel. But it was birthed from this thought. And again, if it's stupid, it's fine. But do you think that like there's more on the line for us as far as being bearers of the good news than there was for Jesus? And let me explain that thought. Jesus came on this earth to share the good news. He knew that he was eventually going to die for that. So it's almost like any opposition just pushed him towards his mission, where I feel like we don't necessarily know if we're on this earth to die for him or not, where we just face a lot of opposition. There's a lot of controversy, a lot of questions with reputation. So yeah, I guess like, do you almost feel like there's more on the line? I feel like the easy answer is no, but maybe a why as to why there's not more on the line for us than there is for Jesus.
What do you mean, like on the line?
That's a great question.
Do you mean like more risk?
Yeah, more risk versus expectation, maybe, because Jesus' expectation was that there was going to be, like, he knew the finish line. So yeah, maybe there's more risk for us as who we are on this earth versus what there was for Jesus. And I'm not saying that's a thought I believe, but it was a thought I was wondering.
Well, when we think of opposition, problems, issues, conflicts, we know as Christians they're going to come. We know that they're going to be a part of the game plan. That doesn't mean every opposition that I encounter is because I'm suffering for the Lord. It could be because I'm being foolish. I could be being a jerk. So I think it's in 1 Peter chapter 2. It says, if you suffer for the Lord, like, don't let it be as a meddler or a knucklehead. That's my translation. Like if you're going to suffer for the Lord, actually do it. You know, suffer for the right reasons. So yeah, I think it is like a choosing our battles. Are we really suffering for God's plan for us, or like Tawny said, are these like man-made boundaries and things that we're doing that invite criticism that's maybe deserved criticism? So I think the church is like had a reckoning the last couple of decades with all sorts of things that maybe we've done wrong, and we should like own that. And that's not suffering for Christ. That's suffering because we've done sin. Yeah. But there is a suffering that happens on account of Christ, on account of doing what's right, and sometimes it can be hard to untangle those two things.
Yeah. I think where I'm coming to the conclusion is that Is there more on the line for us versus Christ? That question is irrelevant. But what we do see is us bringing more on ourselves because of sin nature, or us
More foolishness.
Yeah, more foolishness, kind of bringing more baggage to the table that obviously Jesus did not, because he did not walk in sin.
Well, I think it's easier for us to be deceived.
Yeah.
Even in thinking that this is something God wants or something God cares about. Because some of the worst things that have ever been done have been done in God's name because people thought God wanted them to do it. Not all of them, but some of them.
Yeah.
And so I think we're not always as certain that we're doing the right thing as Jesus would have been. And so for me, that's where things get confusing sometimes. So we have to be praying and asking God to give us discernment and wisdom and be able to know what he really wants versus what's just our flesh or, other people's opinions.
Nat, anything?
Oh, I mean, I have stuff, but it didn't have to do with any of it. This is like maybe a closing thought that I just had.
That's literally where I was going next.
Okay.
So kick us off.
Well, I just think something that, just to make sure that doesn't get missed from this story, is just like how Jesus is so willing to go there with us. You know what I mean? Like, I think that, I think this woman was like, we don't know exactly, but she had a lot of stuff that kind of needed to be processed and worked out. And I just love that, like, for someone, I find myself tangled up pretty often and needing things to be sorted out and emotionally. And I just feel like Jesus was like so willing to go there with her. And I think as I read this passage, and I've read this passage so many times, but that was revealed to me this last time that I read it, that Jesus is so willing to go there with us in those really embarrassing places and those ugly corners of our lives, in those layers of our history that we like just don't want to talk about and cover up. Jesus is ready to go there with us. And so that's just an encouragement I think I'd leave just with this passage.
Yeah.
And I want to say something back to your other question, and that can be my wrapping up. But just no matter how things feel, obeying God is always the best place for us to be. Like, it's never it feels like a risk to follow Jesus into unknown places. It can feel horrible, but we're never safer than when we're obeying him. So being in the center of God's will, no matter what it looks like or what it feels like, that's the safest place we can ever be.
Good.
Bringing a line from an old youth pastor here at River Valley, I'd rather be in danger in the Lord's will than safely out of God's will.
Roger.
You're probably not listening, but if you are, that one's to you. Tyler, any closing thoughts before we...
No, it's a great story. And thought you and Pastor Mark did a great job this weekend. So well done.
Yeah.
Thanks.
No,
It was fun.
it was very good. Yeah, I enjoyed it.
Or last weekend. Whenever
yeah.
it was. They all blend together.
It's supposed to be this weekend, but it was last weekend. So
Yeah, it was on Thanksgiving anyways, long story.
all right, guys. So just any resources, and I think in my email to you guys, I was as vague as can be, but Jesus, the Book of John, or Book of Dawn. You guys don't know the Book of Dawn. You actually have to order it. Or just Jesus in any societal topic, Jesus in women, Jesus in social barriers, just any resource that you can give the listeners just to continue to grow deeper in their understanding of Jesus.
I just encourage people to keep watching The Chosen. I think it's really good. I think
Chosen is good.
Yeah. They're on season 2 now, right?
Season 2, and
Season 2's over.
Oh.
so they finished season 2.
Yeah.
Okay.
But season 3, I don't know when that's coming.
So if somebody was like, how do I watch The Chosen? People have asked me this before. I've kind of said, like, there's an app, you download it and you watch it. Do you guys know the specific, is it the VidAngel app?
I think the app is The Chosen.
It is literally the Chosen app. And you download that and you're going to be able to watch. There's no cost.
Correct. Yeah. What's cool about The Chosen is that people like pay it forward. So like people have paid for us to be able to watch it.
Okay.
And so it's a lot of people have donated so that it's not like heavily advertised or anything like that.
Right.
Or no like product placement. Jesus with a Pepsi.
I mean, I think I'm here for it, but I just Jesus walking with like a Gap T-shirt or something like that, or Old Navy.
It's funny when you see interviews with the Jesus guy.
Yeah.
The guy who plays Jesus, and he's like a normal dude, and his accent's like not real. So
Yeah, I just realized that.
He has a good accent.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Interesting. He's got like a high falsetto or something in real life. You're like, what? All right. Any more resources?
Well, I forgot to think about this because I've been super busy, but I've been listening to John Mark Comer's Live No Lies podcast, and have you listened to it, Tyler? It's really good, just in giving you, especially the one of the last episodes where they talked a lot about spiritual formation and different things you can do to get closer to the Lord, and there's only 7 episodes, so you can kind of binge the whole thing, and it's really good.
Okay. Live No Lies, John Mark Comer.
Yes.
it's his next book too, which is out.
Yeah.
It's a great book.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Did we get any resources from you?
I'll just recommend that one. Live No Lies. It's a book.
I got the podcast. You get the book.
Yes.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much. Listeners, hope you guys enjoyed this. These 3 are awesome. Join me next week for our last Digging Deeper of 2021. We'll actually be with your guys' sister digging into mental health and what we're doing there. So really good stuff.
Is she like going to be counseling you? Like,
Yeah.
like
I'm
Dr.
actually-
Phil?
She doesn't know it. I'm actually just going to be sitting here, camera. No,
Crying.
it'll
This will be
good.
awesome. I say by the end you're bawling. It'll be great.
She'll send you a bill, that's for sure.
Hopefully I'll get like
$300.
a friends and family discount. But yeah, so that'll be good. Just mental health, especially in the holiday season, even its relation to COVID. A lot of good stuff going to be picking her brain.
Yeah.
She's a very wise person. So listeners, look forward to that. We will see you next week.